The story begins in a small mountain town, which is about to celebrate Christmas. At the research center, Dr. Sarah Novak monitors a meteor that alternates in temperature as it approaches Earth. While Sarah watches, the computer screen is replaced by a festive photo of colleagues dressed for Christmas. Neil, her supervisor, appears and expresses concern about her excessive workload, reminding her that it's Christmas and suggesting that Sarah go home. She insists that the meteor is displaying abnormal behavior and deserves attention. Neil tries to reassure her, stating that the object is small, about the size of a table, and will probably disintegrate upon entering the atmosphere. Nevertheless, Sarah requests more time to continue the research, and Neil reluctantly agrees before leaving the lab. Next, we meet Charlie, a local resident, who is surprised by a nearby explosion. Upon checking the noise, he finds his son Peter and his friend Tom, who, bored, decided to play with dynamite. Charlie scolds the boys, explaining that the dynamite is used to control avalanches, not for fun. Peter simply responds that they're enjoying the holiday. Irritated, Charlie warns that if his son wants to lose an arm, he should do it under his mother's watch, so he won't take the blame. Trying to change the subject, Peter and Tom comment on the event organized by Ben, the richest man in town, and invite Charlie to go with them. Charlie has no sympathy for Ben, but since he's the one who pays his salary, he decides to accompany the boys. Meanwhile, the meteor finally begins to enter the Earth's atmosphere. In the town, Ben Kruge and his family greet the residents. We learn that Peter is having a secret relationship with Marley, Ben's daughter. They drift away to be alone, and Peter comments that he's tired of hiding everything. Marley explains that she understands, but emphasizes that her father would never accept it at the moment. To change the mood, Peter gives her his Christmas present, a necklace with a small diamond, saying it was the best he could buy. Marley smiles, touched. Shortly after, they notice an object in the sky and believe it to be a shooting star. Ben tries to call Marley, but he gets no answer and decides to start the festivities. As they watch, the meteor suddenly splits into two parts, one engulfed in fire and the other covered in ice, heading in opposite directions from the town. Frightened, Peter and Marley run for shelter. During Ben's speech, Charlie notices the surroundings slowly beginning to freeze. Looking at the sky and noticing the approaching object, he manages to alert the residents, who panic and start running. The ice meteor strikes the town with force, generating an explosion that knocks Charlie to the ground and leaves him unconscious. When he awakens, he finds a devastating scene, with bodies scattered and severely injured people trying to survive. At the same time, Sarah informs Neil that the meteor has landed nearby and heads out to investigate. Ben also wakes up, asks the mayor to call the governor, and rushes to help his wife, and Charlie does the same, assisting the townspeople until he finds Mayos. He asks if his friend is okay, and Mayos confirms it. Charlie asks Mayos to continue helping the injured before moving on. Ben approaches the area where the meteor fell. At this moment, Mayos appears and asks if the vehicle is on fire, but Ben explains that it's the opposite. Everything is completely frozen. Noticing a body nearby, Mayos decides to check if it is still alive, but upon touching it, his hands start to freeze and he becomes trapped. He calls for help, but Ben panics and runs away. Soon after, a wave of ice hits Mayos, completely freezing his body before shattering it. When Charlie arrives, he sees his friend's remains scattered on the ground and becomes paralyzed, unable to react. Peter returns safely with Marley, but the two are seen by Scott, Marley's brother. The two manage to reach the refuge, and Peter approaches Scott, asking if he has seen his father, but Scott quickly punches him. The women manage to hold him, and the mayor appears, commanding the two to stop and informing them that he just spoke with the governor. He also announces that the area where the meteor fell has already been isolated, asking everyone to stay away and return to their homes. Ben and Charlie appear in the midst of the crowd and immediately go to their kids to check if they are okay. At that moment, Charlie notices an injury on Peter's mouth and questions who did that. Peter responds that it was Scott, and Scott tries to explain, saying he was just protecting his sister. Marley's father doesn't like the situation and asserts that this matter will be resolved later, reinforcing that everyone should go home. Charlie tells his son to go home and inform his mother about the delay. As the townsfolk begin to disperse, Ben tries to start a discussion, but a strong tremor interrupts everything. Ben insists that Charlie should leave and take Peter with him, but he refuses, saying he will stay to help those in need. Irritated by what happened before, Ben states that nobody there needs him, and Charlie retorts that at that moment he's not serving the man, and says that Ben has long forgotten what it means to help someone. Ben becomes even angrier and announces that Charlie is dismissed when another tremor hits the area. They realize that the police have arrived at the site, and Charlie says they need to notify them of what's happening. Otherwise, they will die like Mayos. He asks the officer if he has experience with this kind of situation, but the agent, not understanding, questions what he is talking about. Charlie tries to explain that there is something from the meteor spreading and killing people, but the officer ignores the warning and tells Charlie to leave everything to them. Ben also tries to warn the police not to approach, but is ignored. The thing starts to react to the approach, launching several ice arrows in all directions. Everyone starts to flee in panic, and Charlie helps an injured officer while others are brutally killed. He manages to get into a car, but the wave of cold intensifies and freezes him, leaving him trapped in the vehicle. Ben is in an ambulance with the mayor, trying to ask for help, but he can't. Charlie knocks on the ambulance door and asks for help. Ben asks the mayor to open the door, and soon they help the injured officer. Charlie says they need to evacuate the town and suggests taking everyone to the community center, where his ex-wife Faye can organize everything. The mayor agrees, and Ben encourages him, offering to cover the costs. At the hospital, Charlie calls Faye, explains the situation, and asks if she can make room for the evacuees. Faye promises to help and asks when the people will arrive. Charlie says he is already sending everyone and that he will stay to help, causing concern in Faye. Ben shows up, and Charlie informs him that he has already contacted Faye, asking him to take care of the evacuation notices and the organization of supplies. Ben asks what Charlie will do, and he explains that taking the injured will take time, and that he needs to grab his tools to keep the lights and heating on, as the generator will fail soon. Upon arriving home, Charlie finds Peter and quickly explains the plan, asking him to go to the community center. Peter reveals that he saw the meteor fall and split into two parts, and Charlie asks where the other part fell. Peter thinks it was toward Mount Dickens, leaving Charlie more at ease. On the way back to the hospital, Charlie overtakes a vehicle, but an ice crystal appears on the road. He swerves, but the other car collides and freezes. The crystal unleashes a blast of cold that starts to freeze everything behind him. Charlie finds Sarah, whose car broke down, and offers her a ride. They flee, thinking they're safe, but soon the blizzard catches up to them. Charlie takes a shortcut to the lake, where they find a boat and quickly get in to escape the blizzard. Sarah, desperate, hears Charlie say the lake is running out, and it's time to get out. They reach land just in time. At the top of the mountain, Charlie questions what that was, and Sarah states it's instant freezing. She mentions the meteor, leaving Charlie intrigued, and introduces herself as a graduate student in astrophysics who has been tracking the meteor for months. Charlie asks if she has ever seen anything like it, and Sarah replies that she hasn't, but she needs to reach the impact point to clarify her doubts. Charlie suggests taking her to the clinic to meet the mayor and discuss the situation. Upon spotting a cabin at the top of the mountain, Charlie says he knows a way to get there faster, and they begin to ski. Meanwhile, Peter arrives at the community center and finds his mother, who asks if he is okay. He responds that he is, but expresses concern about Marley. He asks if she has arrived, and his mother says she hasn't seen her and asks for help unloading things. Marley's sister and mother arrive first, and Peter approaches thinking it is Marley, but is ignored and intimidated by her mother. Meanwhile, Marley and Scott are on their way to the center, but they need to stop because a man has had car trouble in the middle of the bridge. Scott gets out of the vehicle to offer assistance. Charlie and Sarah arrive at the hospital and are greeted by the mayor, who informs them that the generator is overheating. He asks Sarah if she was sent by the governor, but she reveals that she is acting independently. Sarah asks to see the meteorite, and Ben tells her where it is. Charlie warns that the site is risky, but she reaffirms that it's part of her research and says goodbye. He asks for help, but the men inform him that they are finishing the evacuation and will leave as soon as the last vehicle departs. Charlie, disappointed, had foreseen this situation and leaves the site. Crystal asks Faye if she has news of her children, as she still hasn't been able to find them. Peter, hearing all of this, becomes worried about Marley and decides to go look for her. The duo approaches the meteorite, but are shaken by several tremors. Sarah tries to reassure him, saying she only needs a small sample. Suddenly, another crystal emerges, opening a crater in the ground and causing them to fall. Inside the hole, Charlie asks if Sarah is okay. and she confirms. He lights a lantern, but soon gets his leg trapped in a log. They quickly manage to free him. Sarah asks where they are, and Charlie says it's an old mine of the town. They decide to go back through the mine to return to the clinic. Sarah goes ahead through a different path, and Charlie follows her. They find the creature's core, and Sarah says she needs a sample. Charlie warns her that she's going crazy. At that moment, the creature reacts, and ice spikes emerge, and they run to protect themselves. Then a strong blast of ice is launched, freezing everything around the mine. The shockwave is felt by everyone. Ben and the mayor step out to check and discover that the crystal has increased further. A new shockwave, stronger, is felt by Marley, who is far away. She gets out of the car to call her brother to flee, but the man with them is crushed by a rock of ice, causing panic. There's no time for lamentations, as several pieces of ice begin to fall from the sky, forcing them to retreat. At this moment, Peter appears and tries to call them, but they can't hear, and Peter is hit by the blizzard. In the hospital, chaos reigns, and everyone runs to survive, but end up being hit by the blizzard, leaving only Ben, who manages to lock himself in a room, and the meteorite continues to grow. Back with the duo, they escape, and Sarah wonders how they are alive. She believes the lantern saved them, as the place formed a circle. Charlie insists it cannot be that simple, and Sarah replies that sometimes the most obvious answers are the right ones. She says she doesn't want samples anymore, and they decide to move forward. In the shelter, Crystal asks if Faye managed to find Peter, but mentions that she believes he went looking for Marley. Upon hearing this, Crystal asks Faye for her cell phone to call the helicopter company that her husband acquired. She contacts a man named Cole and informs him that they are facing problems. Meanwhile, Marley, covered in snow, wakes up in despair. With determination, she manages to free herself and begins to search for her brother. Charlie tries to contact the mayor, and Ben hears voices coming from the radio. Then he decides to leave the room, and upon doing so, encounters the mayor completely frozen. As he tries to grab the radio, the man's body shatters in the same way as Mayos, terrifying Ben, who quickly grabs the radio. While the two walk, they find a completely frozen place, and Charlie wishes to investigate. Back at the shelter, the women are communicating with the pilots, who inform them that almost all the roads are blocked and they can't see anyone. Marley persists in searching for her brother and finally finds him frozen in the snow. She breaks down in tears upon discovering his death, and at that moment, Peter appears to offer comfort. Fortunately for the young ones, they spot a helicopter, and Peter says they need to reach it to be saved. Meanwhile, Charlie improvises a flamethrower and manages to open the hospital door that was frozen shut. The two quickly enter the location, and Charlie tries to communicate through the radio, but gets no responses. They start exploring the hospital and find all the people frozen, feeling sad for arriving too late. However, they keep walking and soon find Ben, who is desolate on the floor. They approach him and Charlie asks what happened. Ben explains that he panicked and went to the room alone, leaving everyone behind. He starts apologizing to Charlie, but he assures him it's not his fault and asks him to gather strength to move on. Thus, they begin to exit. Cole informs the mothers that everything is covered in ice and they haven't managed to find anyone, leaving the mothers worried. However, another pilot in a different area reports that Mount Dickens is completely intact and says he will investigate. At the hospital, the trio discusses what to do next. Ben wants to go far away, but Charlie mentions that perhaps no place is safe. Sarah agrees and suggests they need to try to reverse the situation, stating that extreme heat might help. She explains that if they manage to do this at the Meteor Center, maybe they can rebalance nature. Charlie asks if explosives could help, and Sarah replies that if there are enough, it's likely they would. Ben states he has enough explosives, and with the plan drawn up, they head to the site. Peter and Marley continue walking when they find a backpack but no sign of life. Cole informs the mothers that he is heading back to the hospital as he hasn't been able to find anyone. The trio searching for the dynamites hears the sound of the helicopter. As they spot it, they start waving to be seen, and Cole is extremely happy to realize that some have survived, quickly notifying the women about this. Meanwhile, the couple continues walking, and Marley expresses a desire to give up due to being tired, but Peter insists she keeps going. They see the helicopter again and rejoice, but they are shaken by more tremors, although they keep moving forward. The pilot informs that he believes he has spotted two people, which excites Faye, who asks if he can recognize who they are, As they get closer, he identifies the young ones, leaving Faye extremely happy as she notifies Marley's mother. The young ones rejoice at seeing the pilot approaching, but a huge chunk of ice rises between the helicopter. This causes the helicopter to collide with the rock, resulting in a massive explosion and leaving everyone disheartened. The immense ice rock emits an even stronger shockwave than before, causing the young people to run to save themselves. Cole manages to rescue the trio, and Charlie quickly contacts Faye. She informs the situation of the young people, and Charlie says they will rescue them, asking her to take cover where she is and to build a fire to keep warm. He also requests that they avoid going outside, as they have a plan to deal with the situation. Back with the young people, Marley is left with her leg trapped and begins to lose hope after the helicopter explosion. Freezing from the cold, Peter gives her his jacket and asks her to stay warm, asserting that he has a plan. He shows a lighter and informs that he will make a fire to warm them. He manages to light the fire and moves closer to her to warm up, starting to think of good things. In the community center, a man informs Faye that they will go out looking for help. She tries to stop them, saying that Charlie has a plan to prevent this, but he responds that he can't take it anymore and decides to take the risk. The group is in the air looking for the young people when the helicopter begins to freeze, causing them to lose altitude. Peter warns that they can't stay there, as the fire won't last long, and suggests they move back to the community center. Back with the group, almost all survive the crash, but upon checking on Cole, Charlie realizes the man is dead. They decide to follow the plan and continue walking. The group that left the center soon faces problems on the way, and is hit by an ice rock that emerges from the ground, destroying the car and killing everyone. From the top of the mountain, the trio sees a large cloud approaching and becomes worried. Charlie says they need to split up, as the young ones are heading in opposite directions from the dynamites. Sarah decides that she will destroy the cloud, and Ben offers to rescue the boys, asking Charlie to accompany Sarah, since he has more experience with explosives. Before parting, Ben asks Charlie to be careful, and that he will see him soon. The townsfolk finally manage to close the entrances of the community center when they hear Peter's voice calling for help. Faye asks them to open the door and quickly brings the young ones inside. Marley's mother appears relieved to see her daughter, but soon realizes that her son is not with her. Marley informs that her brother did not survive and begins to cry uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Charlie and Sarah arrive at the cabin where the explosives are stored. Ben, on the other hand, faces difficulties in the snow and ends up tripping over a hand. Upon removing the snow to check, he is surprised to discover that it is his son Scott. However, there is no time for lamentations, as a large cloud of ice approaches him, and already tired of the situation, the man lights a flare and decides to face the fog, thus meeting his end. Charlie and Sarah decide to use a snowmobile to flee from the approaching storm. They quickly start a getaway from the storm, and Charlie decides to test a dynamite. Upon lighting it, he throws it to the ground, causing an effect on the blizzard that recedes. With this positive result, he instructs Sarah to light another dynamite to buy some time, and they celebrate. However, during the journey, Sarah accidentally drops the box of dynamites and asks what they will do now. Charlie informs that it doesn't matter anymore. Sarah begins to panic as they are being chased. In the distance, they manage to see a strong light coming from the other side of the mountain, and Sarah urges him to head that way. In the community center, the residents burn books to try to survive. The duo reaches the area where the other meteorite fell, and Charlie comments that things have reversed, as the town was like that, and that area was covered in ice. Sarah calls his attention to something that is protecting the area from the blizzard. Remembering what his son said, Charlie comments that the meteor split into two pieces and one of the parts came in that direction. He questions Sarah about this, who confirms that she was monitoring and that there were indeed two parts of the meteor. Sarah explains that together they form a normal meteor, but when separated, they become this threat. Charlie states that they need to join the two and wonders how they will do that. Sarah shows her tracking radar and says she will find the missing part, while the ice approaches the community center, leaving the residents worried. While walking through the forest, they find a strange hole and Charlie decides to put his hand in, despite Sarah's warnings. Doing so, he ends up burning his hands, but has heat-proof gloves and manages to grab the object. The two quickly return to the snowmobile and start the process to unite the meteors. The duo arrives at the other part of the meteor, and Charlie prepares to place the fiery piece of the meteorite. Sarah warns that she will stay with him even at risk. Charlie tries to touch the other piece but begins to freeze. With no options, Sarah decides to help him push the other piece as well, but she also begins to freeze. However, they manage to join the two parts, causing a massive shockwave felt by people in the shelter. A few hours later, all the ice begins to melt, and Charlie and Sarah pass out. Charlie wakes up and quickly calls for Sarah, realizing they made it. They celebrate, and Charlie warns that they need to get out of there. The people in the community center decide to go outside and discover that everything has returned to normal, so they are happy. We also discover that Ben did not die in the blizzard and runs to embrace his family. Peter asks Ben if he saw his father, but Ben cannot give news, making Peter believe that his father died in the process. He runs to his mother and begins to cry over the possible loss of his father. Soon Charlie appears, runs to embrace his family, and introduces Sarah as his new friend. Thus, the movie ends with nearly everyone safe.